Hi, this is Dana with GMAT Ninja, and today I will be discussing ing and ed modifiers. In this video, we'll cover how to tell whether an ing or ed word is in fact a modifier, what to do with ing and ed modifiers, and finally we will go over some official examples so you get some practice with some tougher questions. As a disclaimer, there are very few rules that you follow 100% of the time on GMAT sentence correction, so you always want to keep your brain on. But no, yeah, there are exceptions. It's still really important to know the topics that are tested on GMAT sentence correction so you know what to look for the most efficient eliminations, but you always also want to keep logic and meaning in mind. So with that, let's start with what is an ing and ed modifier. To talk about that, here are some simple examples. First, we have running in circles, the puppy chased its tail. In this sentence, our main subject is the puppy, and then our main verb is chased. So really, the heart of the sentence is over here, the puppy chased its tail. And then at the beginning, we have a bit of description. Running in circles is just describing what is happening as this puppy is chasing its tail. This is an example of an ing modifier, right? This ing word kind of looks like a verb, but it is not, right? We already have a verb in the sentence, and this is just there to provide that modification. Similarly, here we have baked to perfection, the cookies were delicious. Our main subject is the cookies, our main verb is were, and this baked to perfection is just describing the cookies. So that is an ed modifier. Now, ing and ed words are not always modifiers. Sometimes they are actually verbs, sometimes they're nouns. So what we'll go over next is how to determine whether a particular word is actually an ing or ed modifier. So starting with ing words can fill multiple roles in the sentence. It could be a verb, it could be a noun, or it could be a modifier. Out of those three, the absolute easiest thing to rule out is whether that thing is a verb or not. Reason is that for an ing word to be a verb, it needs some form of to be to come in front of that ing word. So it needs an is, are, were, have been, something like that to come before your ing word. And I think you can see that in this example. She was sitting. You can tell that that is a full sentence. We've got a subject, we've got a verb, and everything is good to go. If I take out the word was, then I'm left with she sitting, which I think you can tell is not a full sentence, right? It does not actually have a verb. So lots of students see an ing word and automatically think that that thing must be a verb, but that's not actually the case. For it to be a verb, it needs one of these other things in front to act as a verb altogether. It's known as the progressive tense, so you can throw that in your jargon bag if you like it, but overall, pretty easy to tell whether an ing word is actually a verb or not. Secondly, an ing word can be a noun, in other words, just a thing. So in this example, we have he likes swimming, and swimming is just the thing, the activity that he likes. One way to check on this is to replace it with a more familiar sounding noun, so something like potatoes. He likes potatoes. Grammatically, that all works out, right? So swimming and potatoes mean very different things, but grammatically, they are interchangeable. And you can also see a different construction where we have eating is fun. And now eating is the subject of our sentence, so it definitely has to be a noun. And again, you could replace it with something like the potato is fun. Doesn't make any sense, but grammatically, it all checks out. And finally, an ing word can be a modifier, which is just something that describes something else. Same example as you had previously, running in circles, the puppy chased its tail. The point of including running in circles is just to modify this puppy and describe what's going on. Moving on to ed words. Ed words can either be verbs or modifiers. And to make the determination of what that ed word is doing, you just have to think about its function in the sentence. For example, we've got the word kicked, right? Same exact word in these two different examples. In this first one, she kicked the ball. Our subject is she, our verb is kicked, right? So pretty clearly kicked is functioning as a verb. In the second example, we have kicked by the girl, the ball went flying. Now our subject is actually the ball, went is our verb, and then this kicked by the girl is just modifying what happened to this ball. So even though it looks the same as this one, it is performing a completely different role in the sentence. It is there to modify the rest of the sentence. So you know that that word is an ed modifier. As you're going through GMAT sentence correction, you want an ing or an ed word to pop off the page. Next thing you do is determine whether it is a modifier or not. These other ones, if it is a verb or a noun, not really going to be that useful for a lot of eliminations. You're much more interested in the ones that do turn out to be modifiers. So let's check out what to do when you have made that determination. Okay, so once you've determined that your ing or ed word is indeed a modifier, what do you do with it? First, you want to just see what is actually modified by that modifier, and then second, does it make sense to modify that thing in that way? Let's do some examples where the ing or ed is at the beginning of the sentence. Here we have fumbling through her bag, the keys could not be found. Ing word pops off the page. Clearly, we've got this ing modifier in the sentence. And what happens when an author starts with an ing modifier is they set up an expectation that they're describing whatever is about to come next. So what comes next here? The keys. In a very literal sense, what this sentence means is that the keys themselves are fumbling through her bag, which doesn't really work, doesn't make sense in a literal way, is probably not what the author is trying to say. This would be incorrect on the GMAT because the keys cannot physically fumble through a bag. Similarly, here we have topped with cheese and pepperoni, the children enjoyed the pizza. Ed word pops off the page, topped, and it's functioning as a modifier. What is it modifying? The children. So again, this is literally saying that the children themselves are topped with cheese and pepperoni. That doesn't work. We need to modify something that can actually be topped with cheese and pepperoni, not children. So this again would be an incorrect example on the GMAT. Let's look at what happens when you put an ing modifier at the end. Here we have the airplane rattled down the runway, careening from side to side as it went. The ing word here is careening, and what we have here is an ing modifier coming after the main clause of the sentence. Now, this ing word isn't necessarily tied to a specific noun. Instead, it's modifying kind of everything that comes before in that clause. So we've got the airplane rattled down the runway, and then let's describe that situation, careening from side to side as it went. That's totally fine, right? Really, the word careening kind of goes along beautifully with our subject up here, the airplane. The subject is pretty far away. There's a lot of stuff in between the subject and the modifier, but with an ing modifier, that's completely fine. It's not tied to a particular noun. It doesn't need to be the closest noun. Nothing like that applies with an ing modifier. That's pretty different than how you think about something like a which modifier or that modifier. If you want more information on that, you can check out our same video in the series about those modifiers. Main point, though, is that with an ing modifier at the end, you can be a little bit more flexible with what it's modifying, right? And just generalize it to, something has to make sense earlier in that clause. That's how you think about ing and ed modifiers. Let's go ahead and go through some official examples to give you some practice. So as always, I'll throw it up on the screen for a couple of minutes, and you guys can work through it, and we will discuss it afterward. All right, let's talk about it. So, starting with reading A as a whole, we have when viewed from the window of a speeding train, the speed at which nearby objects move seems faster than that of more distant objects. Now, we've got a lot going on in this sentence. Seems like some kind of comparison. We've got a that of, all interesting things. But what I'm checking out is actually what happens up here in the ununderlined portion, where we have viewed, which is an ed modifier. So something in the rest of the sentence is described as being viewed from the window of a train. So in A, what exactly is viewed from the window of the train? The speed is what comes next. Now, is it possible to physically view a speed? Not really, right? Speed is kind of this nebulous concept. You can't actually view speed itself. So, because the speed cannot be viewed, it doesn't make sense to modify it in that way. A is out. Let's look at B. Again, same issue, right? So we start immediately here. The speed, is still the thing that's viewed. Get rid of it. C, same exact thing. The speed can't be viewed. D, nearby objects' speeds. This seems on a surface level to be a little bit better because we've got this word object there, right? Objects themselves can be viewed from a train. So that seems to be on the right track. However, what we have is the possessive form here, right? And so this nearby objects is just there to describe this noun, speeds. So at the end of the day, we're still talking about speeds themselves being viewed from the window of the train. And then we're just like further kind of giving you a little description that, yep, it's the speeds of nearby objects. So D makes the exact same error as A, B, and C, and you can eliminate it. So hopefully E looks okay. And sure enough, we have just nearby objects. So nearby objects themselves can be seen from the window of a train. The modifier checks out, and E is our correct answer. This is a really nice example where just looking at the ed modifier can get you all the way to the bitter end of the question. I'm going to throw another example up there. I'm going to pare it down to just 2 answer choices so that we can really isolate the issue of modifiers. As always, take your time in answering the question, and then we will discuss it afterward. All right, so let's go over A as a whole. We have defense attorneys have occasionally argued that their client's misconduct stemmed from a reaction to something ingested, but in attributing criminal or delinquent behavior to some food allergy, the perpetrators are in effect told that they are not responsible for their actions. Very long sentence to weed through on sentence correction here. But hopefully you've noticed that we've got this ing word here, attributing. And what is this word doing? It's modifying, right? So it's just saying like, hey, here's some description of someone who is attributing these behaviors to something. So we've determined that we've got an ing modifier. Very next thing is to determine what is it actually modifying. As we discussed previously, ing modifiers can either come at the beginning of a sentence and then describe whatever comes next, or they can come at the end of the sentence and describe what came previously. So which piece of the sentence is this describing? There's a really nice hint here with the word but, right? So the word but is actually splitting this sentence into 2 separate clauses. We have one clause up here before the but, where defense attorneys are our subject, and they are the ones that have occasionally done all this stuff, right? Then we split into this second clause, and the ing modifier is tucked into that second clause. So because of the construction of this sentence, we can say pretty confidently that this attributing is modifying whatever comes next. So what is it that comes next as A is written? The perpetrators. Now, does it make sense to modify the perpetrators in this way? Well, what this is saying is that the perpetrators themselves are attributing criminal or delinquent behavior to some food allergy, which is really not the author's intent here, right? In the first clause, we learn that the defense attorneys have made this argument, right? So it's not the perpetrators themselves making the argument, it's the defense attorneys. The way A is constructed, however, we get the sense that it's the perpetrators that are making this attribution. So because that really messes with the meaning of the sentence, A would be incorrect based on the ing modifier, and you can get rid of it. And just to close it out, we can look at B, which changes the underlined portion to if criminal or delinquent behavior is attributed to some food allergy, the perpetrators are in effect told that they are not responsible for their actions. So what this does is just gets rid of the modifier construction entirely, right? So B looks totally fine, not seeing any other issues with it, and it fixes the modifier issue that we have in A. So B would be your correct answer at this point. And let's do one final official example. Again, take your time going through the question, and we will discuss it after. All right, let's go through it. In A, we have the 32 species that make up the dolphin family are closely related to whales, and in fact include the animal known as the killer whale, which can grow to be 30 feet long and is famous for its aggressive hunting pods. Now, a bit of a curveball here, because we don't actually have an ing or an ed modifier in A. However, what we do have is this nice which modifier. If you need to know more about which, you can check out our other video on that topic. But basically, which is going to modify a noun that comes quite close in the sentence immediately preceding that which. The noun that's closest here is killer whale, and that totally makes sense, right? We're describing this killer whale as something which can grow to be 30 feet long and is famous for its aggressive hunting pods. So in A, we have this really, really clear modification of exactly what we want to be modified, which is the killer whale. So we'd keep A on the table. Looking at B, our which turns into an ing modifier. So we have include the animal known as the killer whale, growing as big as 30 feet long. What does that do to our meaning, to change it from a which modifier to that ing modifier? Well, it just makes it a little bit more nebulous. What exactly is being modified? A lot of times when an ing comes at the end, it is going to modify the subject of your clause, not all the time, right? But if you try to do that here, well, what exactly is growing? You'd have to go all the way back to these 32 32 species. And the fact that these are including the killer whales, right? That whole thing is described as growing as big as 30 feet long. Really doesn't make any sense. Now, is it always going to be incorrect to have this ing modifier that really should be modifying the closest noun? No, right? I think that you'd probably find it's okay every once in a while to have something like that in a construction. However, what we have here is an example which very, very clearly modifies the correct noun in A. And then when you compare it to B, it's just not as clear. It's just not as good. In sentence correction, we're looking for the best option, not necessarily the perfect option, and A is very clearly better than B. So we can go ahead and get rid of B because of this ing modifier. In C, we have the exact same thing, so we could go ahead and eliminate it for the same reason. However, I want to stop for a second and talk about the word being, because we do get a lot of questions about the word being on GMAT sentence correction. Sadly, you cannot just see the word being in a sentence and eliminate that option. Sometimes the word being is in the correct answer choice, and you can't just make that elimination. Where you can be really, really skeptical of the word being is when it's used as a modifier, right? So just like any other ing word, it can be a modifier, it could be a noun, or it could be a verb. Something like, he is being pursued by the police. Is being is operating as a verb. GMAT says that's fine. Or something like, I enjoy being happy. Being happy is just the thing that I enjoy. It's a noun. Again, can't really make an elimination. Here, on the other hand, being is operating as a modifier, and that's where you can be really skeptical. Generally speaking, there's going to be a different way to phrase that modifier that doesn't just bloat up your sentence with something like the word being as a modifier. Now, as always, there are exceptions, right? So I can think of one official example that does have being as a modifier. But at the very least, when you see being as an ing modifier, you can be very skeptical that that answer is going to be correct. You can be pretty harsh on it. Here, because we have A in the bag with that which modifier, we've got the issue with ing modifiers in general in this context, we can go ahead and get rid of C. And for D and E, we go back to the modifier that we want to see, but if you notice, our verb has changed. Right, so in ABC, we have include. In D and E, we have includes. Tells us that there's a subject-verb thing being tested, so let's go ahead and find the subject. What is the thing that include or includes the animal known as the killer whale? Well, it goes back all the way here, the 32 species. Right, they include the killer whale. So that is a plural noun that goes nicely with include, and we can get rid of these ones that have a subject-verb issue. And we are left just with A. I hope this video has been useful. As always, leave any questions in the comments below, and I hope to see you next time.